my water just broke. I felt like things really intensified.
She was right there and she was coming.
It was an amazing feeling.
I'm gonna cry just thinking about it. I could feel her head.
We heard her cry. We were squeezing hands and she was screaming.
I'm Bryn Hunt Palmer, and you're listening to The Birth Hour. This podcast is designed as a safe place to come together and share childbirth stories. Stick around and join us to hear informative and empowering birth journeys from all over the world. Today's episode is sponsored by Aeroflow breast pumps. Aeroflow breast pumps has helped thousands of new and expecting parents discover the breastfeeding and postpartum essentials covered by their insurance, including breast pumps and maternity compression and postpartum recovery products. And they take care of everything, including all the paperwork, working with your insurance company, and explaining your options to get these free essentials shipped straight to your door. Aeroflow offers all major breast pump brands, including Medela, Spectra, Motif, Lancino, Amita, Elvie, Willow, and more. New bonus, you can use the promo code TBH15 in their online shop for 15% off all supplies and accessories. All you have to do is go to Aeroflow Breast Pump's website and fill out their free and easy qualify through insurance form. Be sure to go to aeroflowbreastpumps.com/birthhour so they will know that we sent you. At the end of this episode, I'll be talking more about Aeroflow breast pumps and all the different things I love about this service. So stay tuned for that conversation. I also want to remind all of our listeners that we have an online childbirth course called Know Your Options, and it's a comprehensive, evidence-based childbirth course that takes you from the final weeks of pregnancy all the way through preparing for birth and postpartum. And then there's a whole extra bonus course that comes with it that's all about breastfeeding and storing milk and going back to work if that's part of your plan. That's an additional 6 modules. The main course is 12 modules, and you can see those modules broken down into really specific information on what's in there at thebirthhour.com/course. And the course is lifetime access and instant access, so you can really go at your own pace. We have people sign up sometimes years in advance just because they want to be sure to get in there, and then they come back once they're pregnant. We have multiple people who take it for their first pregnancy and then come back and review all the course material for their next pregnancy, which is why I love that it is lifetime access. So again, that information is thebirthhour.com/course, and right now you can use the coupon code 100OFF for $100 off enrollment. And if you've already had your baby and maybe don't need childbirth education right now, another great way to connect with me and other fans of The Birth Hour is via our Patreon group. So you can find that information at patreon.com/birthhour. And there's different tiers and options for supporting the podcast, and with it you get different perks and benefits, including membership in our private Facebook group, access to our archived episodes, and then at our co-producer level you get access to our partner podcast where my husband Richard interviews partners on their perspective of pregnancy, birth, and postpartum. So you can check that all out at patreon.com/birthhour. Today's birth story guest is Megan. She's going to be sharing her home water birth story, and she also saw an OBGYN throughout her pregnancy through her insurance, so she talks a little bit about that co-care experience. All right, let's get to Megan's story. Hi, Megan. Welcome to The Birth Hour. Thanks for coming on the podcast today.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Of course. Will you start by telling listeners a little bit about you and your family?
Yeah, so I live in Denver with my husband and our 5-month-old son and our dog, cat, and chickens, just south of the city.
All right, so we're going to hear his birth story today. So let's start with finding out you were pregnant and how your pregnancy went.
Yeah, so my husband and I, about a year ago, decided to stop preventing pregnancy. So we weren't trying super hard to get pregnant, but I think I just known a lot of people with infertility, so kind of wanted to open the door as soon as we felt like it could be a good thing for our family. We were in a place in our careers that felt good to have a child and all that. So we stopped preventing, and then pretty soon, I think it was the first or second month, it was actually kind of funny. I took a bunch of pregnancy tests when I was late for my period a couple times, and didn't actually know how to read pregnancy tests, or did know, but didn't know you were supposed to wait. So I would just test and then wouldn't see a second line. So I just tossed it. And then it was a week or 2 after my period. And I was like, I don't know what's going on. And then I finally read the back of the bag that said you're supposed to wait 5 minutes. And so when I did that, it was a very strong second line. And yeah, found out we were pregnant that way.
That's so interesting because, for some people it just pops right up, and other people actually have to follow the instructions.
Yeah, I thought that it would, and it did not, at least like 3 or 4 times when I tested.
Yeah. Okay, so once that news sunk in with you, how did you feel both physically and mentally throughout your pregnancy?
Yeah, I think pregnancy was really wonderful. I think all the typical kind of joy and panic that comes with a first pregnancy and all of that. Something that was a little interesting is I'm a therapist and work with infant and early childhood mental health, but I had just taken like a 5-day training on perinatal mood and anxiety disorders the week before I took the positive test. And so it was really interesting kind of swimming in information about pregnancy and that perinatal period. So I felt pretty good, though. I did a lot of exercising with this program called Expecting and Empowered, which was really a wonderful resource. It's like a week-by-week kind of guide through pregnancy and all pregnancy-safe exercises. And definitely didn't do that every week, but when I did, it felt good. And I didn't feel sick at first, which was great. I know that a lot of people struggle with that, but I had a little bit of nausea, but as long as I ate consistently, I was okay. Yeah, so I felt pretty good through the first and second trimesters.
Okay, and then you mentioned a little bit about preparing for birth, but can you talk a little bit about just the type of birth you wanted and how you went about planning that?
Yeah, of course. So pretty much as soon as I got the positive test, I knew that I wanted a home birth, as long as that was a safe option. My sister had actually had all 3 of her kids via home birth, and I was there for the second birth, and of course was in like my really early 20s and not thinking about having my own kids, but it was such a peaceful experience as much as it was also intense and all of that. I was interested in interviewing home birth midwives and kind of pursuing that path. And my husband was super supportive and interested in whatever felt best for me, which was really nice. Yeah, so we interviewed a couple of home birth midwives and found the ones that we wanted to work with. If you're in Denver, they were Meadowsweet Midwifery and they were wonderful. And something that was kind of interesting was that I had dual care with Kaiser, which was my insurance, so they don't really do anything outside of Kaiser. So I just decided to do both, had the home birth midwifery and then did all my labs and still had monthly visits with their OB. And that was just a super interesting experience to have those 2 models of care at the same time. It was just like a wildly different experience each appointment that I had with those providers, because Kaiser was wonderful and definitely didn't have a bad experience with them, but it was very medical and very like, come in, blood pressure, weight, questions, and then I left, versus my midwives were just like so holistic and really talked to me for like an hour and a half every appointment. And yeah, it was a very different experience with both of those types of care.
And did the OB practice know that you were planning a home birth?
They did. So I had told them a couple times. I think by the end, I had to tell them every appointment that I was planning for a home birth, because they kept asking, what hospital are you going to deliver at? And I was like, I told you 4 times already, but I'm actually planning for a home birth. And there was a little bit of pushback or skepticism about that, which was a little hard. Or like, I'm not super confrontational with medical providers. So wanting to say like, I've really thought this through. I feel like I trust my providers a lot, but they were a little skeptical.
Okay, yeah, that's just come up a lot lately, like whether or not to tell which is unfortunate. But so I was just curious how that went for you.
Yeah, and I did register at a hospital and had like kind of that whole, I went and did a tour just because I wanted to know where I would go if I did transfer to a hospital. And so I think I probably told them 4 or 5 times and then was just like, I'm registered at Lutheran. I just didn't feel like it was important to keep telling them.
Yeah, surely there were notes in your chart.
Yes.
All right. Well, anything else from pregnancy you want to share about?
Yeah, I think something that was kind of fun was, so I really didn't want to know the gender. I had a mentor supervisor kind of figure who talked a lot about pregnancy as like the longest setup for a blind date of your life. And I really loved that, of like, yeah, we're just waiting to meet this person that I don't really know. So I was just excited to be surprised about everything about them. And so didn't want to know the gender, but my husband really wanted to know. And so we talked for a little bit, and then I was like, there are no rules about this, and you can find out and I can have it be a surprise. And so that's what we did. And he knew from the anatomy scan at 20 weeks, and actually ended up being a really fun thing, because he, like, there's nothing else in pregnancy that is just the husbands or just the partners, the non-birthing persons. And so it was really fun for him to be like holding this little secret, just him and the baby. And yeah, I feel like that was something people were frequently surprised to hear about, but we really loved that whole process.
That's so fun. Yeah, we have friends who did that, but it was the mom that knew and the dad that didn't want to know. Our minds were just kind of blown by the fact that they were able to keep that.
Yeah.
All right, cool. Okay, so then how did labor start for you?
Yeah, so a week before my due date, we had a wedding in the mountains in Colorado. And so it was funny, me and the baby, I had lots of conversations with my belly about like, we need to wait until after July 10th and then we can get things going. But we went to the wedding in the mountains and came home, and pretty immediately, it was very funny. I felt like my baby was very respectful because we came home and the next morning I woke up with some contractions and had prodromal labor for a couple days. Towards in that last week, so I was probably 39 in 3 or 4 days, I experienced a little bit of decreased movement with the baby. And I think between stories on the birth hour about counting kicks, and I actually had a friend, one of my other best friends, had a stillbirth at about 40 weeks. And so that was just in my mind a couple months before I was due, but that was in my mind. And so as soon as I started noticing some decreased movement, I called my midwives and just said, I'm still feeling him move. It's just less than before. And he had been a really active baby all through pregnancy. And so was just wanting to be mindful. And so they told me to just come in and we would check it out. And it was actually funny. I wasn't supposed to have an appointment that day. And my husband was like fixing something in the sink. So there was like our kitchen sink was all taken apart and everything under the sink was in the kitchen. And I came down and was just kind of nervous and a little tearful of like, I think everything's fine, but I'm going to go in just to make sure. And he was like, okay, I'll come with you, and left everything on our kitchen floor. And so we went to the midwives, and baby's heartbeat was totally fine, but they were like, we kind of want you to go in anyway, just to make sure that everything's fine if you have insurance, and go get like a biophysical profile and a non-stress test and just ease any concerns that you have. So I did go to the hospital. We went into the triage, and this is like 2 or 3 days before my due date. And my blood pressure was kind of high, which I think was likely because I was in the hospital and didn't want to be, was planning for a home birth, all that stuff. And so we went in and they did the NST and the BPP, and everything was looking fine with the baby. But with my blood pressure, they were like, we want to do labs just to rule out preeclampsia. And so they did a bunch of labs and nothing came back positive. And so I was like, great, I think I can go home. I feel fine if the baby's fine. And then this OB came in and was like, I think you should just get induced right now. Like, you're having contractions enough that we can see them on the monitor, and you're close enough to your due date. And we had kind of a hard conversation where I was like, I really want to go into labor spontaneously. And there was kind of this like messaging of like, it's reckless if you leave, and you could develop preeclampsia really quickly, even if you don't have any signs of that besides high blood pressure. And so it was kind of a challenging moment, or just being in a hospital and not wanting to be. And yeah, so she was kind of pressuring me, and I said, is it reckless if we leave? Like, am I putting anyone at risk, myself or the baby? Is there a way that we can continue to monitor blood pressure? And this was something that my midwives and I had talked about previously too when they sent me in. I was like, what if they tell me that they just want to like induce the baby? And they were like, well, if it's just blood pressure, if it's just nothing that's like really a red flag, then you can give us a call and we can talk through your options. And so I called them and we talked through what would be best. And I ended up leaving the hospital, and the OB was really kind of critical, or like, I don't know, it was just a stressful and challenging situation. So I left, and they had me go into the Kaiser office the next 2 days for blood pressure checks. And the next day I went in and my blood pressure was totally fine. So that was a little scare or like blip, but it worked out in the end. And then while I was at the hospital, they also checked me because I was having, on like the monitors, they could see that I was having some moderately regular contractions, and they checked and I was 2 centimeters dilated and like 50% effaced. And so something was happening, but definitely still early labor. So something that was kind of funny is we were in the hospital, and we like ordered all this food because it like came with the hospital stay or whatever. And so after I signed the I'm leaving against medical advice, I was like, can I still eat my dinner? And so my husband and I sat and ate the hospital food right before we left.
Nice. Probably going to need that food.
Yes.
Okay. So then what happened next?
Yeah. So I went home. That was a Wednesday. I kind of labored through the next 2 days, and I think it was prodromal labor. Like sometimes would have more intense contractions and then it would fade. And my midwives had been super wonderful and had talked a lot about how the number one reason for first-time moms to transfer to a hospital from home birth is because they're just exhausted. And so they were super intense and intentional about telling me to rest. So I really rested. I took like so many baths that week and just hung out with my husband and ate good food and went on short walks. And it was a really restful couple days, which was nice, even as I was like getting antsy and excited. And then finally on Friday, I was taking a bath again and stood up and heard like a pop, and my water had broken, or I thought my water broke, but I couldn't tell because I was in the bath or getting out of the bath, and got up, told my husband, I think my water just broke. I don't know what's happening. And he was like, okay, well, let's call the midwives. And they told us just to continue doing what we were doing. And then I went downstairs. I was sitting on a yoga ball and felt a huge gush, and then went upstairs and I had like an amnicator, one of those little test swabs to see if it's amniotic fluid in the home birth kit that they had me order. So I tested and it was bright blue, or dark blue, which is the indication that it is amniotic fluid. And so I took a picture and sent it to my midwives. And so they were like, great, keep on going and we'll check in with you every so often. And I did have a doula that was a part of my birth team as well, who was wonderful. Her name's Anna Static. If you're in Denver again, it was just a wonderful part of my team. And she was planning to come over to go for a walk anyway that evening. And so it was funny because I called her and was like, my water just broke. And she was like, great, I was on my way already to come for a walk. So she came over and just labored with me. Contractions were pretty intense. I think I was able to speak through them and breathe through them, but they were coming really quickly, even from the start, just every like 2, 3, 4 minutes. And they continued to kind of piggyback on each other for a while. Then I just went downstairs and was laboring using the yoga ball and swaying, and my husband and doula were just supporting me as I walked around the house. And we had like a little blood pressure cuff that I kept checking too, just to make sure that things were okay on that front since we had that scare. And then around 9:00, my midwives came over. By that time, I was like having a little harder time talking through contractions, and they were wonderful and supportive and came and said, we think we should check you again. It sounds like you're working really hard. And they checked, and I was still at 2 centimeters at like 10:30 in the evening. So in the last 2 days, nothing had happened in terms of dilating more. So my midwife was wonderful, and she was like, okay, we're going to set you up in bed with a peanut ball. You need to rest. Like, you're working way too hard for being just 2 centimeters. Like, let's see if we can help you to just get a little bit of rest here. So set me up in bed with a peanut ball and my husband, and I just labored for a while. It was like that labor land space of, I have no idea how long passed. And it was funny. I had thought that I would want counter pressure and kind of those typical things that people say is helpful during the most intense parts of labor. And I did not like being touched, but I had my husband's hands, I think, the entire time, and was putting like a ton of resistance on his hands, or when I had been out of bed was like squatting and like holding onto his forearms. And it was almost like to let my body kind of labor and stay like relaxed in like my torso and uterus. I like had to have tension in my hands. And so was like really pushing on him and pulling on him and all that kind of stuff. But yeah, I labored in bed for, I think, like 3 or 4 hours. And then finally around like 1:30, 1:45, I like jumped out of bed and was like, I need more help. And my doula came up because it had just been my husband and I in bed for a while. She came up and was like, okay, what do we need? And I went onto the toilet and labored for a little bit. One of my midwives came in and I was like, can I please get in the birth pool? Because we had a pool set up in the living room. And like I said, I took baths, I think every day for at least the 3rd trimester, if not longer. I just loved taking baths while I was pregnant. And the midwife was like, we want to check you again because the birth pool is kind of like the biggest pain management tool that we have in terms of home birth. And so we don't want to pull out like the big tools until you're at the point when it's more intense. And so I was like, okay, you can check me. And I remember looking at my husband and being like, I made a joke that I think only he understood was a joke, but I was like, maybe I'm at 3 centimeters now, as I was like really, really struggling. And I think it was, that was like a weirdly helpful coping mechanism for me, to say to myself, like, it's going to get worse. It's going to get worse. Like, this is just the start. And so, I don't know, when we go hiking in Colorado too, I do that a lot of like, we're not even close to the summit. Like, we're not even close. And that's like a helpful, like, we can make it, because this is like, we got a long way left to go. So I don't know if that'd be helpful for everyone, but it was a really helpful almost mantra for me. And so they checked me and I was at like 8 centimeters. So I had gone through transition and they were like, hop in the tub. And I was so excited. So I jumped in the tub, and for the first time throughout labor, I really had like some space or like a break. Like I said, they had been really close together from the beginning, and even some of the contractions had been like piggybacking. So they wouldn't even fully subside before they'd start to peak again in terms of like tension or intensity. And so I got in the tub and it was like my body could rest. And so I had like 3 or 4 minutes between contractions and was just like laughing and smiling and like so thankful for those rests. And my doula was like, who are you, like laughing at 8 or 9 centimeters dilated? But it was just really nice to get a little bit of a break. Something that also was really wonderful is that I just trusted my midwife so much. They had talked about, like, when they checked me, they were like, okay, you're still a little closed on like the right side. So if you can position yourself in the tub, like reclined a little bit and even have your right hip up, that can help you to open where you need to. And so them just being so knowledgeable and trusting that they really knew how to help me progress and was really helpful. So I got in the tub and I was in the positions that they were helping me into, and pretty quickly got really pushy. And so it was moving really a lot faster than I expected it to, because my water broke at like 5 p.m. and now it's like 2 a.m. and I was getting pushy, and it was really surprising. So as soon as I started pushing, I like yelled. I was like, wait, I'm scared. Like, I don't know that I'm ready for this. And my midwife was like, that's okay. Like, it's okay to be scared, and like, trust your body. Like, it's going to be okay. And I think it was because I'd had that mantra too of like, there's a long way left to go. I wasn't ready to actually get there or like get to that part of labor. And so it really surprised me. And I looked at her and I was like, I guess there's no going back now. And she laughed and she was like, nope, there's no going back now. The only way through is to have this baby. And so I started pushing, and yeah, I just remember so many thoughts in that phase. I was like, I said out loud, like, I can't believe so many women have done this before. And my midwife was like, so many women are doing this right now too. Like, you are not alone as you're laboring. And that felt like a really beautiful thought. And finally I like was pushing and pushing, and they were helping me, and I yelled out, like, I think I'm breaking in half. And she was like, my midwife was like, press into that. Like, that is what it's supposed to feel like press in. And so I did, and his head came out and they were like, push again. And I said, no, like, my body's not ready to push again. And so his head was out and I waited, and then another push, and he came out and they put him on my chest so quickly. And it was like the most shocking thing. I think, I don't know, something about maybe a first pregnancy too, that like, I know that a baby's at the end of this. And also it was so surprising that a baby was just like all of a sudden there. And it was my baby who had been in me for that long. And yeah, that he was just on my chest was just the most like incredible moment. And so, yeah, he was on me, and they did the APGAR and checked him, and he started crying, and it was just like this perfect little creature, all slimy and on my chest. And yeah, and then they helped me up because I was in our living room and we were going to go to the bedroom. And so they helped me up and like put one of those Chex pads underneath me. We like waddled up to my bed so I could deliver the placenta. And then we waddled up, and I think it took a while for my placenta to come. They ended up giving me a shot of Pitocin in my leg. But then it came right out, which was nice. And yeah, they helped the baby to latch. I think before that happened, the timeline feels all wacky in that season, but yeah, they helped the baby to latch, and the placenta came out, and I did have a 2nd-degree tear that they sutured just on my bed in my room. And I remember being so funny. I felt like my body felt so much better and so much lighter, even as they're like stitching me up, that we just had like a funny conversation about like crafting and all this stuff, as like my husband held our 1-hour-old baby and I was getting sewn up. But it was just a really wonderful, empowering home birth, like a crazy experience to be like, I just did that in my living room and we're all safe and okay. And yeah, all of that.
Yeah. And I always love hearing like if you were at all aware of finding out the sex in that moment or what that looked like.
Yeah, I was not. I did not feel like I was thinking about it at all. And so I'm holding this little baby, and my husband, who's known the whole time that it was a little boy, looked up at me and he was like, "Megan, it's Orson," because we had picked a boy's name and a girl's name before he found out. Mm-hmm. And so he was like, "This is Orson." And it was like a really sweet introduction almost that he got to be able to tell me who he was.
That's so sweet. So then how was postpartum for you guys?
Yeah, postpartum was, I think I remember, like Rebecca Decker says this somewhere, that like having a home birth is just like concierge care. It felt like so nice to have postpartum in my home. My midwives had a very intense no pants rule is what they called it. So they said for 7 days, we want you to not wear pants, because if you put pants on, you'll want to get up and do things. And the only thing you need to do is snuggle with your baby and rest and recover. So I didn't wear pants for a week, and we just hung out in bed. And yeah, I feel like I wasn't ready for as much recovery to happen to my body. Part of my mind was like, I'll have a baby to take care of. And I didn't realize that there was so much that had happened to my body. Well, of course, like, that happens, but it wasn't, I don't know, for some reason it was not on the forefront of my mind that my body would have gone through such a crazy major event. So I think all the typical, like, really scary, like, first postpartum bowel movement and like taking care of the stitches, lots of sitz baths and water. And I just felt like I'd been hit by a truck for a little while. And breastfeeding went well. And my baby was so small. He was like 6 pounds, 10 ounces, which isn't crazy small, but it's on the smaller side. And so he like struggled to latch well. He transferred milk really well and was really motivated to eat, but breastfeeding was really painful for a couple weeks. I had like cracks and blisters and bleeding on my nipples, and it was just it was really rough for a little while. Luckily, my midwives came like at 24 hours and 48 hours and 72 hours and were really incredible breastfeeding support. And yeah, it just helped. And it was so nice to not have to get up and go somewhere or have a bunch of people in and out of our home. We just got to be together in our space, which was really nice. Yeah, I think other things about postpartum, at like my 6-week visit, so I continued to have dual care. My midwife's caring for me the most, and then had like a 2-week phone call and a 6-week checkup with my OB with Kaiser. And at the 6-week checkup with Kaiser, they noticed like along my suture line, there was what they called granular tissue. So like some tissue that just hadn't healed quite right on my perineum with my stitches. And so they used something called silver nitrate, which was kind of like a chemical cauterizing. That was very painful, but it helped a lot afterwards because it just felt like it wasn't quite healing right for a little bit. And then they did that, and it was really painful in the office. And then it was great afterwards. Yeah, the postpartum was as crazy and wonderful as I guess postpartums are. I feel like it was a whole mix of things.
Yeah, it's a hard one to predict, just like birth.
Yes.
Okay, so what about resources? Any you want to share?
Yeah, I mentioned it during the pregnancy part, but I really loved this exercise program called Expecting and Empowered. It's made by 2 moms that are physical therapists, and was just a really nice thing to be able to go back to when I really wanted to move my body or wanted to like feel physically prepared and strong in a way that was safe during pregnancy. And so I really loved that program. And they have a postpartum guide as well that starts at like day 1 with just like diaphragmatic breathing and all of that kind of stuff. So that's one for sure. Another one that I think other people have mentioned on the podcast before is Postpartum Support International. It's just like a mental health resource for postpartum and pregnancy, and it's really wonderful. They have a ton of support groups and book resources and all that kind of stuff. And yeah, it's just a resource that feels really important to have if needed. And other ones, there were 2 apps that I used a ton. I used Down Dog, was a prenatal yoga app, and then Expectful, which I think is a sponsor for the birth hour, or was at some point, with all these meditations. And I loved using that, especially really late in the 3rd trimester, and then immediately postpartum. Their meditations were just really helpful, especially like the middle of the night feeds or with a lot of pain breastfeeding. And yeah, those were really helpful.
Great. All right, well, we'll link to those. And then where's the best place for people to reach out to you?
Yeah, I'm not super active on social media, probably Facebook, which I only joined to be a part of the Birth Hour Patreon group. And so, yeah, on Facebook is the best place to find me.
Okay, great. And then any of our patrons that are listening can find you in that group.
Yeah.
All right, wonderful. Well, thank you so much, Megan, for sharing today.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me.
Okay, now I'm going to chat a little bit more about Aeroflow breast pumps, today's sponsor. Aeroflow has been a longtime sponsor of the Birth Hour, and I've never heard anything but amazing reviews of their service. So the way that it works is you just go to their website and you fill out a really easy form, and then they will contact your insurance as well as your care provider, to get proof that you're pregnant and then to find out what your insurance covers as far as breast pumps. And then within sometimes hours, maybe a day or two, you'll get information from Aeroflow, a link to click, and you'll see all of your options. All of the major brands of pumps out there are available, and you could sometimes upgrade if you want maybe a, rechargeable one, or you want one with a really cute bag because you're going to be carrying it to work every day. All different options that are either free or an upgrade. It's totally up to you, which is really cool because a lot of insurance companies, if you contact them directly, they might have like a couple options. So Aeroflow has really just condensed everything into one spot and made it really easy, which is nice. I also feel like they just can cut to the chase with your insurance company because they know exactly what they're doing. It's kind of like, dealing with your car insurance. If you have a lawyer, you're going to get things done a lot faster. So Aeroflow can act as your go-between, and it's completely a free service to you, which is awesome. I also wanted to mention they have a couple extra things now that I didn't know about when I used Aeroflow to get my breast pump for free through insurance, and those are their compression garments. So they have compression socks, which a lot of people end up needing during pregnancy. I wore them on an airplane when I was flying to Hawaii, and it was a long flight during my pregnancy. And then they have maternity compression bands to help support your belly during pregnancy. And a lot of insurance companies cover these products as well, which is really cool. I would have had no idea. I don't think insurance companies are broadcasting this information, but if you get in touch with Aeroflow, they can figure out whether that's something that is available to you or not. There's also postpartum compression garments as well. And you can always buy these things through their site too, even if your insurance doesn't cover them. The other really neat feature of Aeroflow is the services they provide once your baby arrives, in the form of sending you, restocking your breast pump supplies, like the bottles and the valves and the tubing and all these things that actually need to be replaced pretty frequently if you're pumping every single day. They will send you a reminder and be like, hey, you qualify for free replacement parts, and we're sending them out to you. I don't think I even had to say like, yes, please, or check a box. I think they just sent them to me, which is really amazing. And that's another free service that your insurance covers, but you may not know about if you didn't have somebody advocating on your behalf the way that Aeroflow breast pumps does. So if you're pregnant currently, you can go ahead and do the form whenever you want. Go to aeroflowbreastpumps.com/birthhour. Remember, it's totally free and it's an easy form. You can do that whenever you want in your pregnancy, and then depending on your insurance company, they may want you to, wait until a certain, 36 weeks, I think was mine, until they'll ship the pump. But I was able to make all the decisions ahead of time, and then it just shipped when I reached that point in my pregnancy, and Aeroflow kept track of all of that for me, which is awesome. Other companies might allow it to ship a little bit sooner. You can also fill it out even if you've already had your baby. I believe when I talked to Aeroflow, they said for most insurance companies, it's within the first year. That might vary depending on your insurance. But again, that's something that they will figure out for you. So if you haven't used Aeroflow yet and you want to get your pump for free through insurance, let's take advantage of our insurance plans that we have. Go over to aeroflowbreastpumps.com/birthhour and they will get you all set up. Thank you so much again to Megan for sharing her birth story with us, and to Aeroflow Breast Pumps for sponsoring this episode. Don't forget, you can go to aeroflowbreastpumps.com/birthhour to get your free breast pump through insurance. And also wanted to remind everyone about our Patreon group. Megan mentioned it. We love having her as a member and so many other great members in the Facebook group aspect of that. And you can sign up for that at patreon.com/birthhour, or you can find it via thebirthhour.com/support. To find more information from today's episode, head over to thebirthhour.com and search for Megan's name in the search bar to find her show notes page. Thanks so much for listening. If you enjoyed today's show, head to thebirthhour.com and click Become a Member to pledge your support. And as a thank you, you'll get an invitation to join our private Facebook group and access to exclusive episodes. Your vote of confidence and support means the world to me.